The grandeur and horror of Roman arena spectacles did not emerge overnight. Their roots can be traced back to the early days of Rome, when rituals, religion, and social hierarchy intertwined to create the foundation of a culture that would one day revel in bloodshed as entertainment. Understanding the origins of these spectacles requires a journey into Rome's evolving society, where death, honor, and politics intersected in ways that would eventually lead to some of the most brutal displays in human history. The earliest forms of Roman spectacles were not intended as mere entertainment. Instead, they began as ritualistic offerings to the dead, meant to appease spirits and honor ancestors. The practice of staging violent games in honor of the deceased was inherited from the Etruscans, the people who dominated Italy before Rome's rise. These early games, called munera, were deeply ceremonial. Wealthy Roman families would sponsor fights between slaves or prisoners during funerals to honor a deceased family member. The underlying belief was that bloodshed could maintain a bond with the afterlife, offering the dead both respect and protection. What began as solemn ritual would, over centuries, evolve into public entertainment with layers of spectacle and cruelty. Initially, these funerary games were small and exclusive, limited to the elite and the family circle. But as Rome expanded and wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, the games became public events designed to display social status. Wealthy aristocrats recognized the political power of hosting extravagant spectacles. By funding games, they not only honored the dead, but also displayed their generosity, courage, and influence. The Roman populace, in turn, came to expect these events as a form of civic engagement and social obligation. Over time, the munera evolved from private rituals into state-sanctioned public spectacles, marking the beginning of Rome's obsession with violent entertainment. The transformation of the munera coincided with Rome's political and military expansion. As the Republic grew into an empire, citizens were increasingly exposed to warfare and conquest. The arenas became a microcosm of Rome's larger culture of domination, reflecting the city's imperial ambitions. Victorious generals brought exotic animals, captured prisoners, and even enslaved warriors from across the empire to display in staged battles. This convergence of military conquest and entertainment served a dual purpose. It glorified Rome's power, while simultaneously desensitizing the populace to extreme violence. The seeds of what would become the gladiatorial games were thus firmly planted, rooted in ritual but nurtured by political and social ambition. By the time of the late Republic, gladiatorial combat had become a central feature of Roman culture. Initially, these fights were modest in scale, often involving only a few combatants and primarily serving a commemorative function. But Rome's appetite for blood and drama grew rapidly. The games became increasingly elaborate, introducing specialized gladiator classes such as the murmillo, armed with sword and shield, or the lightly armored retiarius, equipped with net and trident. These classifications were not merely practical. They were designed to enhance the spectacle, providing the audience with dramatic contrasts in style, skill, and expected outcome. The audience learned to cheer for favored fighters, anticipate clever tactics, and revel in the tension of life-or-death combat. What had begun as an offering to the dead became a highly ritualized and psychologically intense form of entertainment. Public expectation played a crucial role in escalating the brutality of the games. Roman citizens came to equate spectacle with status and civic pride. The political elite, in turn, understood that hosting increasingly violent and extravagant events could secure their popularity and consolidate power. Leaders like Julius Caesar, Augustus, and later emperors transformed the games into instruments of propaganda, using mass entertainment to pacify and impress the populace. The scale of these spectacles expanded dramatically, with entire arenas constructed to accommodate tens of thousands of spectators. The Colosseum, completed under Emperor Vespasian, became the iconic symbol of Roman might, architecture, and most notably cruelty. The early Roman spectacles were also shaped by cultural notions of honor, masculinity, and courage. Gladiators, often slaves or prisoners of war, were seen as embodiments of martial valor. Their willingness to fight and die on the sands of the arena was both feared and admired. Even in death, the spectacle served as a moral and social lesson, reinforcing the values of discipline, obedience, and courage. For the spectators, witnessing the ultimate struggle between life and death became a communal experience, blending fascination, horror, and social cohesion. The arena, in this sense, was as much about shaping the collective psyche of Rome as it was about entertainment. Religious elements remained intertwined with the spectacles as they evolved. Ceremonies before and during the games often invoked the gods, seeking their favor or acknowledging their presence in the unfolding drama. Some historians suggest that the ritualistic aspect of the games helped justify the extreme violence, framing it as a sacred duty rather than mere cruelty. Sacrifice, blood, and death were normalized under the guise of divine approval, blurring the lines between ritual observance and public spectacle. Over time, the religious justification became less central, yet the underlying cultural acceptance of violence persisted, enabling the increasingly extreme forms of arena entertainment that would later define the empire. By the time the empire was fully established, Roman spectacles had become grandiose, theatrical, and deadly, far removed from their humble and solemn origins. The arenas were filled with not only gladiators but also exotic animals, elaborate sets, and intricate plots that recreated famous battles or mythological scenes. Spectacle and narrative intertwined with brutality, creating a form of entertainment that appealed to every sense, sight, sound, and emotion. From its beginnings as a funerary ritual, the Roman spectacle had become an enduring testament to the empire's power, ingenuity, and capacity for cruelty. In conclusion, the origins of Roman arena spectacles reveal a gradual, almost organic evolution, from sacred ritual to public entertainment. Initially rooted in religious observance and the honoring of the dead, these events grew to reflect social hierarchy, political ambition, and a fascination with violence. They were a mirror of Roman society itself, complex, hierarchical, and UNF. Lynching in its embrace of power and spectacle, understanding these origins is essential to grasp why the Roman people became enthralled by brutality in the arena, paving the way for the extreme spectacles that would later shock even contemporaries and leave an indelible mark on history. Roman spectacles evolved from solemn funerary rituals into public entertainment. One of the most central and enduring elements became the gladiatorial games. These contests, often fought to the death, epitomized the Roman fascination with violence, bravery, and spectacle. Gladiator battles were far more than mere combat. They were a cultural phenomenon that blended skill, entertainment, social hierarchy, and a chilling celebration of mortality. To understand the magnitude of these games, one must explore the lives of the gladiators themselves, the structure of the matches, and the broader societal implications of a culture that glorified brutality. Gladiators were typically slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, though some free men voluntarily chose this dangerous profession, lured by fame, potential wealth, or the promise of honor. Once enrolled, gladiators were subjected to intense training in special schools called ludi, often under the strict supervision of a lanista, a professional trainer and manager. Training was grueling and disciplined, designed to forge not only strength but also endurance, skill, and obedience. Gladiators practiced with wooden weapons to perfect technique, learned to anticipate opponents' moves, and developed strategies suited to their fighting style. Their lives were tightly controlled, with strict diets, exercise regimens, and punishments for disobedience. The rigorous preparation was essential. The arena was not only a place of public display, but also a lethal stage where mistakes often meant death. The gladiators themselves were carefully categorized based on fighting style, armor, and weapons, creating a diverse and dramatic spectacle for audiences. Some of the most notable types included the murmillo, heavily armed with a large shield and short sword, the retiarius, lightly armored and equipped with a trident and net, and the threx, wearing a small shield and curved sword, often facing larger opponents. These classifications were not merely functional, they were designed to enhance entertainment by creating contrasts and predictable narrative arcs for spectators. The light, agile fighter would face the slow but powerful opponent, building tension and anticipation. Each match became a story of skill, courage, and survival, meticulously choreographed to elicit maximum engagement from the crowd. The gladiatorial arena itself was a central stage of spectacle. The Colosseum, Rome's grandest amphitheater, could hold tens of thousands of spectators, all of whom came to witness the blood-soaked drama. Matches were often part of larger events, which could last for days or even weeks, featuring animal hunts, executions, and reenactments of famous battles. Gladiator games were theatrical in nature, with elaborate entrances, music, and ceremonial rituals. The emperor or local magistrate's presence added an additional layer of political significance, as the ruler's favor could determine life or death, pardon or execution. The games were as much about social display and political maneuvering as they were about fighting. The violence in the arena was both systematic and sensationalized. Gladiators fought with deadly intent, but their actions were carefully regulated to ensure maximum entertainment while maintaining a semblance of order. Despite this, death was an ever-present reality. Although not every bout ended in death, some skilled or popular gladiators were spared. The fights were designed to push combatants to their limits, emphasizing danger, injury, and bloodshed. The crowd played an active role in determining the fate of a defeated fighter, often signaling with gestures whether mercy should be granted or execution demanded. This communal judgment reinforced the societal normalization of violence and the thrill of life or death stakes as entertainment. The psychology of Roman audiences played a crucial role in the game's escalation. Romans were not passive observers, they were participants in a ritual of violence. Spectators derived pleasure from witnessing skillful combat, daring maneuvers, and dramatic tension. The crowd's reactions, cheers, gasps and shouts, shaped the spectacle, encouraging greater risk-taking and more elaborate displays from both gladiators and organizers. The games fostered a culture in which death and suffering were not only tolerated, but celebrated. Violence became a form of social cohesion, binding citizens together through shared emotion, moral lessons, and entertainment. Gladiator games were also deeply intertwined with Roman notions of masculinity and honor. The ideal gladiator embodied courage, endurance, and a stoic acceptance of death. Even in defeat, a gladiator could achieve glory, demonstrating qualities that the Roman elite valued and sought to cultivate in themselves. The concept of virtus, courage, and excellence was central to Roman identity, and the arena became a symbolic testing ground for these virtues. Success and survival in the games brought fame and recognition, while death could immortalize a gladiator as a model of bravery. This cultural emphasis on valor and spectacle reinforced the normalization of extreme violence, creating a society in which the public consumption of bloodshed was both educational and entertaining. The political implications of gladiatorial games cannot be overstated. Roman leaders recognized the art, nay, as a tool to influence the populace, distract from social unrest, and assert authority. By providing grand spectacles, emperors could demonstrate wealth, magnanimity, and control over life and death. Julius Caesar famously used games to gain popularity and political leverage, while emperors such as Titus and Trajan staged elaborate events involving thousands of combatants and exotic animals. These spectacles were carefully choreographed to glorify the ruler and the state, merging entertainment with propaganda. In this way, the arena served as a stage not only for combat, but also for the assertion of imperial power and social hierarchy. The lives of the gladiators themselves highlight the inhumane aspects of the games. Slaves and prisoners trained under harsh conditions, often with little hope of freedom. Injuries were common, medical care limited, and mortality rates high. Yet the spectacle demanded ever greater displays of endurance, daring, and theatricality. The gladiator became both a commodity and a symbol, a living instrument of public entertainment, political strategy, and cultural identity. The dehumanization inherent in this system reflects the broader Roman acceptance of violence as both a tool and a form of art. Gladiators were admired, feared, and exploited in equal measure, their suffering turned into profit, prestige, and public fascination. Over time, the cult of violence surrounding gladiatorial combat intensified. Games grew longer, bloodier, and more elaborate, incorporating exotic animals, naval battles, and mass executions. The arena became a theater of death, where spectacle and cruelty intertwined seamlessly. What had begun as funerary rituals evolved into an institutionalized form of entertainment, reflecting Roman values, ambitions, and moral boundaries, or lack thereof. The fascination with gladiators and their battles was not simply a curio. It was a cultural phenomenon that shaped public life, politics, and social norms in ways that are still studied and debated today. In conclusion, gladiatorial battles were far more than brutal contests. They were a reflection of Roman society itself, revealing its obsessions, hierarchies, and complex relationship with violence. The cult of violence in the arena was both a form of entertainment and a social instrument, shaping values, reinforcing power structures, and desensitizing citizens to human suffering. Gladiators were at once heroes, spectacles, and victims, embodying the paradox of Roman society, a civilization capable of extraordinary achievements in art, engineering, and governance, yet equally capable of celebrating and institutionalizing extreme cruelty. The legacy of the gladiatorial games offers a stark reminder of the human capacity for fascination with violence when combined with power, ritual, and spectacles. Roman spectacles evolved. It became increasingly clear that human combat alone was not enough to satisfy the appetite of the masses. The arenas of Rome began to feature something far more exotic, terrifying, and extreme: the Venationes, or staged hunts involving wild animals. These deadly contests were designed not only to entertain, but to display the vast reach of Rome's empire, its ability to control nature, and the ultimate supremacy of man over beast. What began as a display of bravery and skill gradually transformed into scenes of pure horror, where bloodshed extended beyond human combatants to include thousands of animals captured from across the known world. The origins of the Venations can be traced back to the Roman elite's desire to demonstrate wealth, power, and sophistication. Exotic animals were expensive and difficult to acquire, often imported from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Lions, tigers, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, bears, and even giraffes were brought to Rome at enormous cost, and their presence alone in the arena was a symbol of status. These creatures were captured through dangerous hunts in their native lands, often resulting in mass slaughter before they even reached the city. Once in Rome, their treatment varied. Some were kept alive in captivity, others starved to make them more aggressive, and all were ultimately forced into deadly encounters in the arena. The spectacle was both a marvel and a moral shock, reflecting Rome's willingness to subordinate nature and morality to entertainment. Venations were meticulously planned and highly theatrical. They were often part of larger festivals with elaborate staging and choreography that transformed the arena into a simulated wilderness. Organizers would recreate forests, rivers, or battlefields within the confines of the amphitheater, providing exotic backdrops for the hunts. Animals were released into these staged environments, sometimes alongside human combatants trained to fight them. Gladiators, specially trained beast hunters known as Bestiarii, would confront these predators armed with spears, swords, and shields. Unlike traditional gladiatorial combat, the goal here was not always to survive an opponent of similar skill. It was to demonstrate courage against the overwhelming power of nature itself. For the audience, the spectacle was thrilling. The roar of a lion, the charge of an elephant, or the sudden attack of a leopard heightened both fear and excitement. The brutality of these matches was staggering. Animals were often starved, provoked, or injured prior to the contest to increase aggression. Battles could involve multiple predators attacking at once, or humans deliberately placed in situations with almost no chance of survival. The spectacle emphasized chaos, danger, and bloodshed. Venations were not only about killing animals. They were about creating fear, awe, and dramatic tension. For Roman audiences, watching humans confront such overwhelming odds became a form of vicarious thrill, a test of skill and courage amplified by the knowledge that any misstep could result in death. One of the most infamous features of the animal spectacles was the use of mass slaughters. During some grand events, hundreds or even thousands of animals were killed in a single day. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio and Suetonius record instances where elephants, lions, and other beasts were hunted and executed in highly orchestrated displays, often involving mechanical traps, concealed pits, and chariots. These mass killings served both as entertainment and as a demonstration of Rome's dominion over the natural world. They also reflected a troubling cultural acceptance of cruelty. The sheer scale of slaughter became normalized and celebrated. While modern audiences may recoil, for Romans, the more exotic and deadly the spectacle, the more impressive the event. Venations also included public executions staged with animals, adding another layer of terror. Condemned criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war were sometimes thrown into the arena to face wild beasts. This practice, known as Damnatio ad Bestias, was intended to be both punitive and entertaining. The condemned were often unarmed or minimally equipped, giving them little chance to survive. Lions, leopards, or bears would maul, gore, and kill in full view of the audience, creating a horrifying spectacle that emphasized the power of the state and the futility of resisting Roman authority. This form of execution combined punishment, political messaging, and entertainment in a way that would shock modern sensibilities, yet it was widely accepted in Roman society. The exoticism of the animals themselves added to the spectacle. Cr. Creatures unfamiliar to most Romans, hippopotamuses, crocodiles, and giraffes, were not only dangerous but also symbols of the empire's far-flung reach. Capturing, transporting, and displaying such creatures required immense resources, showcasing Rome's logistical and military prowess. The animal's presence was a testament to the empire's ability to conquer distant lands and bring their wonders to the heart of the city. In this sense, the Venations were more than entertainment. They were propaganda, a vivid demonstration of Rome's dominance over both humans and nature. Despite the public fascination, Venations were not without risks. Accidents, escapes, and uncontrollable animals sometimes turned the arena into a scene of chaos. There are accounts of lions breaking free, elephants rampaging, and trainers being killed in front of the audience. The danger heightened the drama, creating an unpredictable and electrifying atmosphere. Spectators were drawn to this combination of skill, bravery, and risk, knowing that what they witnessed could end in catastrophe at any moment. The unpredictability of nature, combined with the orchestrated violence, made these spectacles some of the most thrilling and morally questionable events in Roman society. Over time, the scope of the animal spectacles expanded even further. Emperors such as Trajan and Titus staged events involving thousands of animals and combatants, creating massive spectacles that could last for days. The Colosseum's engineering marvels, including trapdoors, elevators, and elaborate staging mechanisms, allowed for the sudden appearance of animals and the seamless integration of human and animal combat. Some events simulated naval battles, with animals incorporated into the staged chaos, while others recreated famous battles with historical or mythological themes. The combination of ingenuity, danger, and spectacle reached its peak during the early imperial period, cementing the Venations as a central feature of Roman entertainment. The cultural implications of these events were profound. By forcing humans to confront deadly animals, the Romans reinforced ideals of courage, endurance, and submission to fate. The arena became a space where life and death, man and beast, and natural and social hierarchies collided. The spectacle desensitized citizens to violence, encouraged a fascination with bloodshed, and celebrated the domination of nature as a reflection of human and imperial power. While some contemporaries criticized the excesses of the games, for most Romans, the more dangerous, exotic, and bloody the spectacle, the greater the honor and excitement. In conclusion, the use of exotic beasts in Roman arenas exemplified the empire's escalating obsession with spectacle, danger, and cruelty. The Venations were more than simple entertainment. They were demonstrations of power, engineering, and theatrical ingenuity, blending human skill with the raw terror of untamed nature. Mass slaughters, staged hunts, and executions by beasts reflected a society willing to normalize extreme violence, both for amusement and political messaging. These deadly contests pushed the boundaries of morality and spectacle, leaving a lasting legacy of horror and fascination. By confronting the public with the raw power of the natural world, the Romans created events that were both awe-inspiring and morally unsettling, highlighting the complex and often disturbing culture of their empire. In the grand arenas of ancient Rome, violence extended far beyond the gladiatorial duels and exotic animal hunts. Public executions became one of the most shocking and horrifying forms of entertainment, where death was staged as a spectacle for thousands of spectators. Known as suppletia, or executions for the people, these events were designed to punish, terrorize, and captivate. They were a stark reflection of Roman society's acceptance of brutality, an exhibition of state power, and a grim form of public theater that blurred the lines between justice and spectacle. Unlike gladiatorial combat, which was often based on skill and performance, public executions were preordained and inescapable. Condemned individuals, criminals, slaves, rebels, and prisoners of war were sentenced to death by law or decree, but their execution was transformed into a public ritual. The methods were diverse and horrifying, ranging from crucifixion and burning alive to being thrown to wild beasts, often staged to maximize suffering and spectacle. For Roman audiences, these executions were more than punishments. They were a dramatic demonstration of the state's power over life and death, a lesson in obedience, and an opportunity for collective catharsis. One of the most infamous methods of execution was Damnatio ad Bestias, in which condemned individuals were thrown into arenas to face wild animals. This punishment combined elements of the gladiatorial games and the Venations, but with an emphasis on human suffering. Lions, leopards, bears, and other predators were unleashed on the unarmed victims who had little chance of survival. The result was a horrifying display of fear, struggle, and death, witnessed by thousands of spectators. Accounts from Roman historians describe victims being torn apart while the crowd roared, the spectacle serving both as entertainment and as a brutal warning to others. Unlike gladiators, the condemned had no hope of glory. Their deaths were purely punitive, yet their suffering became a form of public theater. Another gruesome method was crucifixion, reserved for the most serious offenders, particularly slaves and rebels. Victims were bound or nailed to wooden crosses and left to die slowly, often exposed to the elements for hours or even days. Crucifixion was not only physically excruciating, but also deeply humiliating, designed to strip the individual of dignity and serve as a visual reminder of Roman authority. The slow, agonizing nature of crucifixion made it a spectacle of endurance and suffering, with spectators witnessing the gradual demise of the condemned. In some cases, large numbers of individuals were crucified simultaneously along roads or in public squares, creating a chilling tableau of human agony intended to instill fear and reinforce social control. Burning alive was another method of public execution, often reserved for crimes considered exceptionally heinous or treasonous. Victims were bound and set aflame before cheering crowds, their screams echoing through the amphitheater. The psychological impact of such executions was immense. The crowd witnessed the power of the state to command life and death, and the sheer terror of witnessing human flesh consumed by fire left a lasting impression. In certain cases, emperors staged these events with elaborate theatrics, using pyres, scaffolding, and timed sequences to maximize the dramatic effect. The execution became both punishment and spectacle, blending fear, fascination, and public judgment into a single unforgettable event. Some public executions were designed to replicate historical or mythological narratives, further enhancing their theatricality. Condemned individuals might be forced to act out famous battles, betrayals, or divine punishments before meeting their deaths. For example, a criminal could be dressed as a mythical figure, and killed in a manner reminiscent of a legendary story, transforming punishment into a grotesque performance. This blending of theatre, history, and execution emphasized the cultural literacy of the audience while reinforcing moral and political messages. It was a stark reminder that in Rome, death could be both personal punishment and public spectacle. The psychological and social dimensions of these executions were profound. Spectators were not passive, they actively participated in the ritual through gestures of approval, disapproval, or excitement. Thumbs up or down, though the exact historical details remain debated, could determine the fate of a defeated gladiator, while public reactions to executions reinforced the authority of the state. The arena served as a communal space where morality, law, and social hierarchy were dramatized. The public nature of these punishments amplified their impact, instilling obedience, reinforcing societal norms, and offering a shared, if macabre, form of entertainment. Executions also served a political purpose. Emperors and magistrates used public death as a tool to consolidate power, punish dissent, and demonstrate the reach of their authority. High-profile criminals, political rivals, or rebellious slaves could be executed in elaborate spectacles that broadcast the consequences of defiance. These events sent a clear message: Rome controlled both life and death, and resistance was futile. By staging executions as entertainment, rulers transformed fear into spectacle, ensuring that power was both feared and admired. This manipulation of violence for political gain highlights the darker intersections of spectacle, governance, and social control in ancient Rome. Despite their frequency, some executions were so extreme that they shocked even contemporary Romans. Accounts describe criminals being executed in chains, dragged through the streets, or forced to fight multiple wild animals simultaneously. Certain emperors pushed the boundaries of cruelty for effect, staging elaborate sequences that could last hours or days, while some historians criticized these excesses. For the average Roman citizen, the combination of horror, suspense, and theatricality made these executions unforgettable. They were an essential part of the cultural landscape, a reminder of the omnipresence of death and the power of the state to dictate its timing and method. The legacy of public executions in Roman arenas is both fascinating and disturbing. These events reveal a society that normalized extreme violence, where human suffering could be orchestrated as public entertainment, and where the lines between justice and spectacle were blurred. They provide insight into the values, fears, and desires of Roman society, highlighting the ways in which power, morality, and entertainment intersected in profoundly dark and theatrical ways. By turning death into a spectacle, Rome created events that captivated, horrified, and controlled its citizens, leaving an enduring mark on history. In conclusion, public executions in ancient Rome were far more than a legal or punitive necessity. They were an elaborate form of theatre designed to awe, terrify, and entertain. From Damnatio ad Bestias and crucifixion to burning alive and mythological reenactments, the methods were diverse, horrifying, and meticulously orchestrated. These spectacles emphasized the power of the state, the fragility of life, and the cultural acceptance of violence as entertainment. For Roman audiences, witnessing the suffering and death of others became a communal, cathartic, and morally instructive experience. The arenas of Rome thus became stages where punishment, politics, and spectacle collided in ways that continue to fascinate and horrify historians and modern audiences. Alike by the height of the Roman Empire, the arena had evolved from modest funerary rituals into stages for some of the most elaborate, terrifying, and excessive spectacles in human history. While gladiatorial combat, exotic animal hunts, and public executions had long captivated the populace, there were occasions when Roman organizers pushed the limits of cruelty, ingenuity, and scale so far that even contemporaries recoiled in horror. These events, designed to awe, terrify, and entertain, reveal the extremes of Roman spectacle culture and the empire's willingness to fuse entertainment with death on a massive scale. One of the most infamous of these spectacles was the Naumachiae, or staged naval battles. Unlike traditional gladiatorial or animal contests, Naumachiae involved the construction of massive artificial lakes or the flooding of amphitheaters to simulate real naval engagements. Thousands of combatants, often prisoners of war, condemned criminals or enslaved men, were forced to fight as sailors and marines in mock battles that mirrored historic naval conflicts. The battles were choreographed for dramatic effect, yet the conditions were brutal. Many participants drowned due to inexperience, overcrowding, or inadequate vessels. Reports from Roman historians such as Suetonius and Cassius Dio describe Naumachiae as spectacles of unprecedented scale, where life expectancy was often measured in minutes rather than hours. While the spectacle thrilled audiences with its novelty and drama, it also exemplified the empire's extreme exploitation of human life for entertainment. Another example of excessive spectacle was the mass execution of enemies or criminals, staged as public theatre. Certain emperors sought to impress or intimidate the populace with displays of overwhelming power, often involving hundreds or even thousands of condemned individuals at once. During the reign of Emperor Titus, the opening games of the Colosseum reportedly involved the deaths of over 9,000 wild animals and countless human combatants, creating a spectacle so enormous that even seasoned Romans were reportedly shocked. These events combined elements of gladiatorial combat, Venationes, and public execution, transforming the arena into a theatre of mass death. The scale and orchestration required immense resources and planning, emphasizing the ability of the Roman state to command life and death with both precision and excess. Certain specialized gladiator combats were also pushed to extremes. Historical accounts describe fights where multiple gladiators faced off simultaneously in chaotic, almost theatrical arrangements. Sometimes the matches were deliberately unbalanced, forcing a small group of lightly armed fighters to confront heavily armored champions or wild animals. The combination of chaos, danger, and dramatic tension elevated the spectacle, drawing audiences to the edge of their seats. These fights tested not only skill but endurance, courage, and the will to survive against overwhelming odds. While designed to entertain, they also blurred the boundary between sport and execution, turning the arena into a stage where human suffering was a central feature. The Romans also created elaborate historical and mythological reenactments that went far beyond storytelling into the realm of danger and death. For example, the Emperor Trajan staged mock battles depicting the conquest of Dacia, using thousands of combatants, animals, and carefully constructed sets to simulate forests, fortresses, and rivers. Participants were often prisoners or slaves, forced to act as soldiers or mythical figures, frequently at risk of serious injury or death. These events were intended to both educate and entertain, showcasing Roman military prowess while thrilling the audience with realistic and deadly simulations. The combination of history, myth, and theatrical danger made these spectacles some of the most elaborate productions in Roman entertainment history. One of the most extreme and shocking aspects of Roman spectacles was the use of mass executions in imaginative and terrifying ways. Condemned individuals were sometimes executed in sequential or interconnected displays, creating continuous hour-long sequences of horror. For example, accounts suggest that in some events, criminals were thrown to wild animals in staged patterns designed to maximize audience visibility and impact. Others were executed in elaborate traps that replicated scenes of mythological punishment, such as being impaled, burned, or dismembered in front of the crowd. These orchestrations transformed punishment into an art form, albeit one rooted in cruelty. The audience witnessed carefully choreographed sequences of suffering, each designed to elicit fear, fascination, and awe, highlighting the Romans' unique fusion of spectacle and morality. Even the Romans, accustomed to extreme displays of violence, occasionally expressed shock or disapproval at the scale or audacity of certain events. Writers like Seneca criticized the excessive bloodshed and moral corruption inherent in large-scale games, warning that the public's appetite for cruelty could erode civic virtue. Tacitus recounts instances where entire populations of condemned individuals were killed in a single spectacle, noting the audience's fascination mixed with horror. These reactions suggest that while Roman culture normalized violence, there were limits even for those immersed in spectacle. Some events were remembered not only for their grandeur, but also for their audacity and the ethical questions they raised, demonstrating that the extremes of Roman entertainment could provoke reflection as well as excitement. Engineering played a crucial role in enabling these excessive spectacles. The Romans constructed complex mechanical devices, trapdoors, and elevators to orchestrate sudden appearances of animals, combatants, and scenery, creating moments of surprise and shock. Multi-level seating allowed tens of thousands of spectators to view these large-scale spectacles simultaneously, while acoustics ensured that the roars of animals, the clash of weapons, and the cries of participants echoed throughout the arena. This combination of engineering, logistics, and theatrical design allowed the Romans to stage events that were not only deadly but also visually and emotionally overwhelming. The spectacle became a holistic experience, engaging the senses, emotions, and imagination of the audience. The cultural implications of these extreme spectacles were profound. They reinforced the authority of the emperor and the state, normalized violence as entertainment, and desensitized the population to suffering. At the same time, they demonstrated the extraordinary logistical, engineering, and organizational capabilities of Rome, turning the amphitheater into a stage where human skill, imperial power, and the forces of nature collided. The events shocked, awed, and entertained, leaving a lasting impression on all who witnessed them. They were both a reflection of Roman societal values and a test of human endurance and morality, blurring the line between celebration and horror. In conclusion, the most extreme spectacles of ancient Rome, Naumachiae, mass executions, unbalanced gladiator combats, and elaborate reenactments, went far beyond ordinary entertainment. They pushed human endurance, ingenuity, and cruelty to the limits, captivating audiences while shocking even those accustomed to the brutality of the arena. These events reveal a civilization obsessed with power, control, and spectacle, where life and death could be orchestrated for public amazement. The legacy of these spectacles is both fascinating and disturbing, highlighting the paradox of Roman culture, able of remarkable engineering, artistry, and governance, yet equally capable of orchestrating unprecedented cruelty for entertainment. By examining these events, we gain insight into the extremes of human imagination, the darker aspects of societal values, and the chilling ways in which spectacle can transform suffering into a shared cultural experience.